The man everyone called an angel turned out to be the biggest thief in our town, and I was the one who exposed him. There was a time when even I believed Mr. Richard Carter was one of the kindest people alive. If someone needed money for an operation, he would be there with a donation box. If a widow couldn't pay her rent, he would organize a fundraiser. If a poor family needed groceries, he would post emotional pictures on social media with captions about humanity and kindness. People respected him so much that nobody ever questioned him, including me. Looking back now, I realize that trust can be the perfect disguise for a thief. It all started one rainy evening. I was returning home when I saw an elderly widow, Mrs. Margaret Wilson, sitting outside her tiny house with tears in her eyes. Everyone in our neighborhood knew her. Her husband had died years ago, and her only son worked in another city, but barely earned enough to survive. I asked what had happened. She looked at me with swollen eyes and quietly said she had never received the charity money that people had collected for her heart surgery. At first, I thought she must be mistaken. After all, I had personally donated a generous amount. Many others had donated too. I told her, "That can't be true. Mr. Richard Carter announced that your treatment had been paid for." She lowered her head and whispered, "My dear, I only received 2 grocery bags." I felt a strange knot in my stomach. Maybe there had been some misunderstanding. Or maybe the hospital had delayed the payment. That's what I wanted to believe. The next morning I visited the local clinic. The doctor recognized me immediately. When I asked about Mrs. Wilson's surgery, he looked confused. "What surgery?" I explained everything. He opened the records. There was no payment, no appointment, no booking, nothing. At that exact moment, the first crack appeared in Mr. Richard's perfect image. Still, accusing someone without proof would have been foolish, so I stayed quiet. For the next 3 weeks, I simply watched. I attended every fundraiser. I listened carefully. I noticed that Mr. Richard always insisted on collecting donations in cash. He never issued receipts. Whenever someone asked how much had been collected, he smiled and changed the subject. Something wasn't right. One Sunday, he stood outside the church, holding his donation box. His voice echoed across the courtyard. "A little girl needs urgent kidney treatment. Even $10 can save a life." Within minutes, people filled the box. Children emptied their piggy banks. Old men donated from their pensions. Women removed rings from their hands. I watched everything. Then I quietly followed Mr. Richard after everyone left, instead of going toward the hospital. He walked into a shopping plaza. Curious, I stayed at a distance. To my surprise, he entered an expensive electronics store. Half an hour later, he walked out carrying a brand new laptop. I froze. Maybe he had bought it with his own money. I couldn't jump to conclusions, but the timing disturbed me. Over the next month, similar things kept happening. A new smartphone, designer clothes, luxury watches, weekend trips. Yet every fundraiser claimed there wasn't enough money for patients. The pieces of the puzzle were finally starting to fit together. I decided to verify every charity campaign from the previous year. It wasn't easy. I visited hospitals. I spoke with families. I met widows. Some had received only a fraction of the donations. Some had received nothing at all. One father broke down while talking to me. People had donated enough money for his son's surgery, yet he had been forced to sell his car because he never received the funds. That conversation kept me awake all night. This wasn't carelessness. This was theft from people who were already suffering. I knew I had enough suspicions. But suspicions don't convince communities. Evidence does. Fortunately, Mr. Richard loved social media. Every donation campaign was recorded. Every event had pictures. Every speech had videos. I collected everything. Then I compared dates with hospital payment records, fundraising announcements, and eyewitness accounts. The numbers didn't match, not even close. Thousands had been collected. Only small amounts had reached the families. The rest had simply disappeared. I contacted 3 respected elders in the neighborhood. Instead of making accusations, I quietly showed them my research. At first, they refused to believe me. One elder even became angry. "Mr. Richard has helped people for years." I nodded. I thought so too. Then I handed him the documents. Hospital statements, donation announcements, witness testimonies, bank receipts from families who had received almost nothing. The room became silent. Nobody defended Mr. Richard anymore. One elder looked at me and said, "If this is true, the entire community deserves to know." A public charity event had already been planned for the following Sunday. Nearly everyone in town would be there. Mr. Richard would once again stand on stage asking people to donate. I decided that would also be the day the truth came out. The hall was packed. People applauded as Mr. Richard walked onto the stage in a well-dressed designer attire. He smiled like a hero. He spoke about kindness. He quoted morality teachings about helping the poor. Then he lifted the familiar donation box. Just before the first donation was dropped inside, I stood up. My heart was racing. Every eye turned toward me. I politely asked if I could say a few words before the fundraiser began. Mr. Richard smiled confidently. "Of course, we always welcome those who support charity." He had no idea what was coming. I walked to the microphone carrying a simple brown file. I congratulated everyone for their generosity. Then I asked one question. "Can anyone tell me how much money was collected last year for Mrs. Margaret Wilson's surgery?" Silence. Mr. Richard quickly answered, "It was all spent on her treatment." I nodded. Then I held up the hospital's official statement. "It says no payment was ever made." A murmur spread across the audience. Mr. Richard laughed nervously. "There must be some clerical mistake." I opened the file again. "This is the second hospital. Then the third. Then the fourth." One by one, I presented documented evidence from multiple charity campaigns. Every page revealed another missing payment, another struggling family, another broken promise. The applause had completely disappeared. People were now whispering in disbelief. Mr. Richard's confident smile slowly vanished. For the first time since I had known him. He looked afraid. I wasn't finished. I displayed photographs of his expensive purchases made within days of major fundraisers. I explained the timelines. I showed how donation drives coincided with luxury spending, while beneficiaries remained untreated. Then I looked directly at him. I didn't shout. I didn't insult him. I simply asked, "If every dollar reached the poor, where did your sudden wealth come from?" The hall became so quiet that even the ceiling fans seemed loud. Mr. Richard opened his mouth several times. No explanation came. Finally, one elderly man stood up. He recognized the donation receipt in my file. He had donated his entire month's pension for a sick child. His voice trembled. "I trusted you." Another woman stood. So did I. Within moments, dozens of people were on their feet, not to attack him, but to demand answers. The respect he had built over years collapsed in a matter of minutes. The community committee immediately announced an independent audit of every fundraiser. They requested financial records, receipts, and account details. Mr. Richard couldn't provide them. The investigation uncovered exactly what many had feared. Large portions of donated money had never reached the intended families. The remaining funds were recovered through legal proceedings and redistributed under transparent community supervision. From that day onward, every charity campaign in our town required written records, public accounting, and multiple volunteers overseeing the donations. Trust was no longer based on a single smiling face. It was built on transparency. Months later, I visited Mrs. Margaret Wilson again. This time, she had finally received proper medical treatment through the new community fund. She smiled with tears in her eyes and held my hand. That moment meant more to me than exposing a fraud ever could. People still ask me why I took such a big risk. My answer is always the same. A thief who steals from the rich commits a crime, but someone who steals from the poor steals hope itself, and hope deserves someone willing to stand up for it. That day, I didn't destroy a good man's reputation. I simply removed the mask from a dishonest one. The truth didn't need anger. It only needed evidence, and once the evidence spoke, no lie was loud enough to silence it.